Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. This episode, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff. This is an enlightenment episode, so yay for us. And we're just going to be all over the map because I'm going to go ahead and let this one run a little bit long. We're going to talk about unconditional love, probably a little bit about William Blake, and, other stuff. So, one of my friends says, unconditional love is unacceptable in polite society. And he's very right that this is a problem. Part of it's justifiable. Societies need to have structure to be societies. Otherwise, they're not societies, they're just love fests, right? Like, there's a reason for this. And unconditional love. So, one of the groups I'm involved with, we talk about different locations of enlightenment, basically, well-being, and different spots where you could be in the continuum, you know? And because not everyone is in enlightenment with everything is great and it's all love everywhere. There are levels of enlightenment where there's no emotion at all. You get way past that. Everything gets very flat. Very nice. Very nice to be in, but it's kind of an alien territory. And then there are levels where, you know, there's a lot of strife and there's a lot of irritation, you know, a lot of potential for frustration. And this actually makes a lot of sense too, because one of the things that goes on with enlightenment is that you're freeing yourself from the regular world, the Maya, the illusion, the world of desires and suffering, or whatever you want to call it. So when you are frustrated in your individual freedom, you would feel that frustration. You would have irritability. It's okay. You know, there's an okay response to that. It's okay to want your freedom and to not be forced into the molds of other people. Remember that for a lot of people in your life, who you are, the interface, they can't connect to you directly. Who you are is what's most valuable or useful to them. And if that doesn't suit your enlightened state, then it's perfectly reasonable to be a little bit irritable about that. You know, it happens. At a different level of well-being and enlightenment, you might not notice. You might literally not notice. You know, the body's doing the body thing and there's no real volition or decision to it, so whatever the other people want your body to be doing, you're not really associated. That's fine too. You know, this is enlightenment. There's different levels. One of those levels is a pure love, like a pure experience of joyous love for all things all the time. And it's a very difficult place to do stuff from. It's, for example, if you were running a business, credit, landlord, auto repair, and almost any business, and you were in that state, fully involved in that state, you go broke. You go broke really fast. Really, really fast, because it's just unconditional love. So it is unacceptable in polite society. It's a statement that has this initial, oh yeah, you know, there's a problem with society, but it's also a statement that has a, oh yeah, we've engaged, people in general have engaged in these social games. I'm going to call them games because, you know, that's just one of the ways I talk about it. People, you can think of them as models or languages for interaction or ways of getting our bodies to connect to each other more closely, whatever it is. I'm going to call them games because I think of games as a positive, not a negative. Wow, I'm saying a lot today. A lot of people see games as me not taking things seriously enough or granting the importance and drama of things, and well, that's actually part of why I use the word. So yeah, games. Humans involved in games, and games make up our society, and unconditional love is generally unacceptable because it just breaks through those games and doesn't really play, and that's not a very good way to run a society. Also, remember that a lot of our society stuff is biologically based, and who, for whatever reason, we inhabit these bodies with minds. Minds are emergent from the body, they're part of the body. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that biology and that biological psychology. There's a lot of social hierarchy and social interaction rules that are just part of that. You can break through it. You can actually neurologically reprogram yourself so that it behaves, so that your body behaves differently, reacts differently. That's a big part of the Enlightenment thing, the fundamental aspects of well-being, is a neurological shift from fight or flight to confidence and overcome. You know, there's that shift. So unconditional love is unacceptable in polite society, in society in general. Okay, there are places, you can make places for that. Religious houses of worship are a really good place. If they're the right ones, in the right places, in the right time, they're a really good place. There are also social, I'll also call them social events, interactions, places where that's acceptable, retreats, depending on how your society expresses this. Swinger parties could be a place where you express unconditional love. You know, don't judge. There are people out there who only do this because of that huge joy, love thing, and not because of like sexual domination or whatever. Who you are, what society you're in, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. What is the freedom that unconditional love gives you? You know, for some people it's the freedom to walk around in nature. For some, it's the freedom of their body. You know, it depends. I'm not going to judge this, but I'm going to present that there are places for unconditional love. One of the responses that my friend, and this is Nate, he's really fantastic. One of the responses that my friend got, I'm going to look over here and read, is, what's the difference between unconditional self-love and hacking the reward function? It seems inadvisable. And this is one of those head desks because, of course, the person changed it from unconditional love to unconditional self-love. And somehow there's a problem with unconditional self-love. Well, there's not. The first big, huge thing I'm going to talk about right there is that unconditional self-love is a goal. It's almost a necessity, you know. You have to be able to love yourself unconditionally. Unconditionally. Not based on social judgments, not based on what other people think you're worth, not based on what other people have told you you think you're worth. Like, you have your own opinion of your self-worth, and it's usually based on other people. It's based on something outside. It's based on effects. It's based on actions. It's based on results. It's based on money. It's based on deservedness. Now, unconditional self-love is almost a requirement. I want to say it's a requirement just for healthy beingness. Unconditional self-love is fantastic. Get it, grab it, accept it. Let me help you with it if you're having problems with it, okay? That's just something I do. Unconditional self-love. If you're in a state where you have emotions, unconditional positive regard for yourself, your body, your mind, the parts that make you up if you're beyond emotion. This is incredibly valuable. This is a basic thing in the game. It's your basic cheat code, okay? Stop telling yourself that you're not worth loving yourself. That is literally, by definition, insane, unsane, not sane, bad, okay? Love yourself unconditionally. So the first thing is, I don't know why he changed unconditional love into unconditional self-love. I'm going to guess that he's got a problem with that area and that he's not able to I'm not identifying the person, but I'm guessing, and he's unable to actually go beyond that and touch the concept of unconditional love in the universe, of everything. Like, love the cockroach, love the person, love the murderer, love the palm tree, love everything. Like, it's a pretty powerful place to be. Very hard place to run a business from. So, somehow, not only do we get away from unconditional love and into unconditional self-love as a problem, but then he ties it to reward function. Now, he doesn't specifically say the biological hormonal reward functions, but when you talk about hacking functions, I think he means mechanisms here. I'm like, the words, I'm having to stretch a little bit because some of this doesn't really make sense. Hacking the mechanisms of reward in the biology, body, brain, mind, remember brain is part of the body, the biology, has nothing to do with self-love. It has to do with feeling good and possibly, I can see the idea of those hormones, the mechanisms of reward being used to help with forgiveness, to help with feeling okay, to help with getting past maps of self-hate and into maps of self-love. So I can see that. I can see that hacking the reward functions, the reward mechanisms, is useful to helping you attain self-love. But self-love, unconditional self-love, or unconditional love in general, is not hacking the reward mechanisms of the body, the brain. Those are largely hormonal. They're not completely hormonal because we are an ecology. We're not a body in the classic sense that we thought of it in the 19th century or the early 20th century. We are an ecology. There's a lot going on here, and the ecology extends out from our body to a certain degree, which is really cool when you think about it, because a lot of what goes on with enlightenment is actually in the sense that your awareness expands outside of your body, but your ecology, your body itself, extends outside of your body, so that's kind of cool. So manipulating biology is not the same thing as self-love or unconditional love or unconditional self-love. I'm just going to say self-love. So you've got three things: manipulating biology, self-love, and unconditional love, and they're all different things. And I thought that this comment was really interesting from that point, from that point of view, from that aspect, that it went from unconditional love to someone's map of self-love must be hacking biology inappropriately. Don't be in that place. Get out of that place. If you're stuck in that place, get out. That's not a healthy place to be. That's really all I have to say about that. I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting thing to come up as a response, that we went from unconditional love and society to the idea that self-love is merely biohacking, and inadvisable biohacking. I looked at the person's other stuff, other involvements, and biohacking is actually something they see as a positive. Just it has to be used appropriately to what they want, which seems to be effort-based success. Maximum effort for maximum results, or maximum effort for appropriate results. Don't get crazy there. Maximum results is a little bit too hackish and too positive. You have to have that negativity in there, right? So that's just, I really thought that was an interesting one. I'm going to get back to the unconditional love possibly a little bit later. William Blake. Let's talk about William Blake. William Blake was an insanely avid, crazy, weird, mysterious, occult, mythological artist. And there was a long, deep dive into his stuff and some of his prophecies and how he would write poetry and how he wasn't generally appreciated in his time, but shortly after his time. Now, he was part of the whole Enlightenment phase, later Enlightenment, Age of Reason, and he actually saw some of the technology and the simplistic materialism as a problem. The idea of taking vision, taking what you see, and mapping it down to just mechanical impulses. At the time, mechanical was probably the appropriate word, mechanical impulses. Took away the flavor of life. He was right. There is something deeper than just bits of information going through the electrical connections into the brain computer. We've had this problem for a long time. What was it Lilly? Lilly was one of the early cybernetic scientists was like, yeah, I'm going to take my research group and we're just going to spend a weekend and we're going to do the sight thing. We're going to do vision for computers. That was 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, and we're still not done. We're still not there. It turns out it's a little more complicated, even in mechanistic aspects, than anyone thought. 40% of your brain is devoted to vision. That's a huge amount. That's insane. So, William Blake had this idea that the mechanism, mechanical aspects of science. He didn't like Isaac Newton. He didn't like Newton's idea of reducing the magic of the universe to Newtonian physics, which of course is incomplete and inadequate to describe most anything. A lot of people try to use Newtonian ideas, let's call it Newtonian ideology, to describe the body, and they do a very poor job with that as well. You end up with drugs that have side effects that require drugs that have other side effects that require other drugs to moderate, and we have this really completely fucked up healthcare system that is basically operating on a Newtonian model, if you want to think of it that way. And it doesn't work. Things are a lot more vibrant and lifelike than they are mechanistic. But William Blake himself is almost inapproachable right now unless you go back and you look at things. Remember that William Blake is contemporary with a lot of the Enlightenment thinking, the later Enlightenment thinking. The Revolution, the American Revolution was William Blake's era. And he thought it was a great and fantastic thing, but that it was doomed. Okay? Doomed to failure for various reasons, involving human control and not being free enough. And materialism. Materialism kind of sucks that way. The materialism that we have, that came out of the last couple of centuries, is like nothing the world has ever seen. It's very difficult to map your mental space. Historical fiction gets this problematic a lot. It's very difficult to map your mental space back prior to the Age of Reason, when the world was a vibrant and living place, Very different. So to get William Blake, you have to kind of get yourself into that headspace of that transition from animism to materialism. And that's a really hard thing to do. So I don't get into William Blake all that much. I love his art. I've read some of his stuff. Just a topic that came up, and what it brought up to me was the idea of the right words for the right person, right place, right time. You can put yourself into a position where William Blake starts to make a lot of sense and really get something out of it. But it doesn't just happen. If it talks to you, if you look at some William Blake poetry in his art or art and you say, wow, then going deeper into that requires getting deeper into the milieu, into the aspects of things, into what made his world. And that's okay to do. This is one of the things that people don't always recognize as super important. This is something that gets into reenactment or choice of clothing, aesthetics, what you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with the aspects, the trappings of what you're trying to get into, it really does help. It really does have an effect on the psychology, the body, the mind, everything that goes into that. So if you want to grow out a ponytail, put on a frock coat, and try to figure out William Blake, more power to you. Please keep me apprised of your progress. I think he's a fantastic guy. I'm living in a different world, and I don't, in this lifetime, currently seem to have the time to go delve into that. But it's the same thing with a lot of people. There's a lot of early 20th century stuff that goes into that. There's a lot of psychology, alternative psychology that comes out of the early to mid 20th century, especially mid-century, that I connect to a little bit, and then I have to go beyond it because it becomes a system thing, and you lose yourself in the headiness. It's all very in your head because it's a materialist psychology. There's a lot of cool tricks in it, and pragmatically very useful ways to get rid of traumas or to remap traumas in the brain and stuff, because I'm still living in a body. I still have to deal with what the brain and the mind do. Even if they're doing them without me, it's kind of helpful to train them to do the right thing. But you can get lost in these things as a system, as a hierarchy of belief, and then that's not so useful. So I don't know where I'm at. Like, I don't have a roadmap to follow. And I think that that's one of the key elements of a lot of people in looking at enlightenment and paths and modern world. A lot of people, I think the majority of people, for most of their lives, remember that people change throughout their lives. I think the majority of people through their lives are mapped, have the intention, have their own life script set up. They've made their own internal, universal soul decisions to follow a map, to look for a map, to look for something that rings true, to find something to join, be part of. It's a very difficult and weird place, and not very successful, broadly speaking, to go it alone, to go blaze new territory. I'm not sure if I'm really a trailblazer. I sometimes think I am. I sometimes think I'm just traveling multiple paths at once, and that the paths are all laid out. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter because I get to laugh and enjoy the experience no matter what it is. It's fantastic. But I do think that a lot of people are more comfortable with a map, with a trail to follow in a given lifetime. And that still gives you the whole map of the universe over time. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like anyone's doing anything specifically different, better, worse. Going off and trailblazing alone, if you look at history, if you look at the people who do it, the success rate is very small. Okay, the number of people who come out and really go down in history as shining lights is much, much smaller than the number of people who kind of crash and burn, And that's a somewhat a social judgment, but I think that it's based on a sort of reality. There are people. That one's difficult, because I'm not talking strictly about the social judgment. I'm talking about what their effects on their lives are, and you get someone like Aleister Crowley. He went off and did his thing, but he self-evidently, internally crashed and burned. It wasn't just his body that failed, that happens. Bodies fail because people don't always pay attention to them when they get off into la la land. Okay, I go woo-woo and the body is just there, right? Someone needs to be around to take care of the body, and if you're not always there, then you need help, right? Support networks. That's actually one of the best things about paths to travel with others, even if you're trailblazing, is having those multiple support networks, because everyone can give infinitely to everyone else without diminishing themselves. That's a basic, right? So you look at someone like Crowley, his body failed, but his presence failed also. He went down some paths where he didn't keep his shining star going. And I think that is a problem. That's like a 90% problem. Maybe it's a 70% problem. Maybe it's only a 50% problem, because a lot of people who look like that don't actually feel like that. They don't tend to get famous. The really big crash and burns tend to get famous, but people who kind of what let's say, fizzle out a little bit, they don't get famous. Okay, they don't get into a big space where people say, "Oh, that guy had it all going, and then he just kind of got quiet and enjoyed his life." Like that's not news, right? No one cares about that. Just you did, instead of making a movement or something, you were just like, "Yeah, hey, that's cool. I talked to you guys. Now I'm gonna go like look at some flowers and enjoy myself." That's very possible, and I suspect that there's a certain amount of that is hidden. In research, they would call that the file drawer problem. Stuff that never gets published, never makes the news. You know, the big wins and the big failures. You've got the Oshos and the Jesuses and the Buddhas and stuff, and no one pays attention to the guy who just figured it out and went and watched the flowers. Even though he probably has more people following his path in his lifetime successfully than some of the bigger operators or names or traditions do, because of the dilution effect. You know, there's a dilution when you get mechanistic with how you structure a way or a path. Buddhists have this in spades, right? There's an 8-fold this and a 12-fold that, and 7 rules for this and 16 rules for that. And I thought the Taoists had, the Chinese Taoist thing had a lot of things with numbers and lists, but the Buddhists, wow, the more I get into it, the more I'm like, there's this and 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 this. I'm just like, way too mechanistic for me. I think it helps a lot of people. Especially, I feel like Buddhism is actually on an ascendancy because it's having such a huge impact on the materialism of Western culture, and it fits so well with materialist, by the numbers, everything has to have a logical sequence kind of thing. There's no real freedom of exploration, and that's good for a lot of Western psyches right now. So that's pretty awesome. I think that we're opening back up. I think that as that is peaking, also we're opening up to a more animistic shamanic path. Okay, I think shamanism is also getting ready for an ascendancy, but that might be a couple generations down the road, or it might be all together at once, because these things are not one movement. There's a whole world out there. There's space for more than one cycle at a time. So that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about, The unconditional love thing, I'd like to get back to that just for a moment, because the self-love aspect of that is so critically important. If you're still here and you're still listening to me, I just want you to take away from this that a good goal, a reasonable spiritual goal for right now, for the rest of this year, for the rest of the next 2 moon cycles, whatever, a good space to be would be figuring out unconditional self-love. You can judge the actions, but separate the actions from the self and say, not paying that bill was kind of shitty. We're going to have to deal with that. But not, I'm a shitty person. No. Unconditional self-love. Separate that from any necessary negative analysis of actions. If you must blame, and have guilt and stuff, put the blame in the actions, not in yourself. Self-love. I would suggest that as probably the biggest single wonderful thing to do for this phase of the year. Stay sideways.